into this, and I'm going to be very quick today. I'm going to shoot for this to be 15 minutes or less. I want to look at a verse of scripture on the subject of pride that's probably the most famous on the subject. This idea is repeated throughout the scriptures, both sort of axiomatically, like kind of just said the same thing said in different ways, and also through the moral of the story. You know, a lot of times if you read a story, you'll discover that story kind of highlights this idea, and it's Proverbs chapter 16, verse 18. Pride comes before being destroyed. A proud spirit comes before a fall. And this verse is, of course, why we're calling this series of talks Falling for Pride. Nobody wants to fall. Nobody wants to destroy themselves or others, right? Can we just remind ourselves of that for just a moment? Could you repeat this with me? I don't want to destroy other people. Did you say it? I don't want to destroy my spouse. I don't want to destroy my children. I didn't hear that one. Did you say that one? I don't want to destroy my friends and my next door neighbors in this time. And if that's true, then we got to be really careful about this. It says that pride is how you destroy things. Pride causes destruction. Pride causes a fall. Nobody wants the end result of pride in our lives. Nobody wants to fall. Nobody wants to destroy things. But that doesn't mean that we don't get those end results sometimes. Too often we find ourselves falling for pride without even knowing it. We don't even realize it's happening until after it has happened. So I want us to spend a few weeks talking about pride in its different forms so that we can do our best to avoid that fall. Before we can get around to addressing how to fix it, again, Derek and Abby gave us a nice little practical step to be taking, something that I think is going to be really useful, and we're actually going to end our time together today with that very idea of pausing, quieting ourselves, and just listening for a few moments. But before I get into a whole lot of practical steps for how to fix pride, how to knock it out, I want to help you identify it in your life, because pride is tricky. It's sneaky. It's one of those things that it's so easy to diagnose in other people and really difficult to spot in our own lives. So I'm going to give you a sort of diagnostic tool as today's message. So maybe you don't want to think of this as a sermon today. Maybe think of it more like a BuzzFeed quiz. That's kind of maybe what this is going to seem a little bit like. This is a test that you can take. 3 questions you can ask yourself, and I'm going to explain the questions to determine whether you might be falling for pride in any area of your life right now. And if you're watching this on our Church Online platform, you can actually access the little tab under me right now that says Notes, and all 3 questions are already there. That doesn't mean you can check out. Just give me a couple of minutes to explain them, but the 3 questions are right there for you. Ask yourself, first, to discover, am I falling for pride? Ask yourself, well, am I bitter? And this one is probably the most obvious and exhaustive way to spot pride in our lives. Because of course you're bitter about something. Of course I'm bitter about something. Of course I'm dealing with some area of my life that didn't go the way I hoped or isn't going the way I had hoped. And I'm blaming someone or something for that. That's what bitterness is. It's blaming somebody else or some other circumstance, but usually somebody else, for the way you feel. Let me say it again. Bitterness is blaming somebody else for the way you feel. I'm bitter right now about this whole COVID-19 thing. I'm losing kind of a lot of money every day that this keeps going on. I'm losing a lot of freedom every day that this goes on. There are circumstances that are beyond my control put in place by other people that are impacting my life in negative ways. That's not bitterness. Bitterness is when I blame those people for how I feel Blaming them for the circumstances, well, yeah, I mean, I guess people are to blame for pretty much every circumstance we would ever face. That's not bitterness. Bitterness is blaming the circumstance and blaming the people who caused it for the way I feel. It's me not taking responsibility for my own feelings about things. You might be falling for pride. If you're bitter right now, if you're blaming anybody else for your unhappiness. And that one stings, because it absolutely has to include all of our current circumstances, the economy, other people's reactions to this stuff. If we're unhappy in this season, we are all tempted to blame our unhappiness on the actions or inactions or attitudes or decisions of other people. Now, if you want to blame your circumstances on them, I guess that makes sense. If you want to blame your circumstances on yourself, I guess that makes sense. If you want to blame your circumstances on the universe, I guess that makes sense. But blaming those circumstances for how you feel, that is what bitterness actually is. If your circumstances are negative right now, I'm so sorry. I'm sure a lot of you are experiencing some things that are very, very difficult right now in your life. If you're hurting because of what is going on in your world, our world right now, that makes sense. This is hurting a lot of people, and you may be one of those people who's being very, very negatively impacted by this. You might be somebody who says, Drew, I hear that you're losing some money, but clearly you're still fine, and that's true. Like, we're still okay, and I have that to be thankful for. I realize that some people are saying, I'm not losing some money, I've lost it all. I know people have lost jobs. I know you're hurting right now. That makes sense to be hurting, but blaming others for how you feel, for how your circumstances are making you feel, is a sneaky little way that pride starts to try to make us fall. We have to take some responsibility for how we interact with the things that we're facing. Question number 2, am I lonely? Now, I'm going to tread lightly here because I realize that loneliness is a delicate topic. It may seem that we're all a little more lonely than usual right now, but I want us to consider that although we are socially distanced right now, loneliness is actually still a choice that we all make. Because of the technology that we have, even the least technologically savvy among us, loneliness isn't necessary. Not in the ways that it would have been in 50, 60 years ago. And also, more importantly than the technology itself, because of the community that you're a part of, just by the sheer fact that you're watching this right now, you are one of us, you're with us, we've got your back, we're right here with you. Because of that, loneliness isn't necessary. We need each other. We need to talk to each other. We need to connect. We need to lift each other up. And this one cuts in both directions. Let me just share on both sides of it. If you feel sad and isolated right now, you may be falling for pride by not letting other people know the truth. It might be pride that is keeping you from saying to someone, I feel sad and isolated, and I need somebody to be here for me. I know for an absolute fact there are probably 20 or 30 or maybe 50 or 60 people who would call you immediately if they knew that you needed to hear another voice, that you needed somebody to listen to you or talk to you or make you smile. I know there are people who would drop by your house and sit on your front lawn 6 feet away from you or 16 feet away from you if you'd prefer, and or maybe through a screen door on the other side of glass. You could talk on the phone while you actually look at each other. I know there are people who would do that. I know there are people who will text you memes and funny pictures and encouragement all day long if they knew that you needed them. Physical social distancing is out of our control right now, but loneliness is still a choice. So we got to take, and I know how hurting you might be if you consider yourself to be one of those lonely people and how difficult it is to take that step. But I just want to encourage you, take the responsibility for it. Stand up and say, I'm not going to be so prideful that I spend this time feeling lonely. And then on the other side of this one, maybe you're not feeling sad and isolated and you're doing just fine. You have a responsibility as the church of the risen Jesus to seek out other people who might need to borrow some of your strength right now, might need to borrow some of your strength and your joy and your peace right now. Maybe think about some people in your life that you haven't heard from for a while, or you haven't seen their face in a while. You haven't seen them smile in a little while, and go out of your way to see if you could make them smile this week. Loneliness is a choice, and we can all fight against it in this time. And it is only pride that prevents us from calling that out. Question number three. Probably the most painful, but it's also the most painful because of the pain of the first two. Let me just get there. Am I defensive? Am I falling for pride? Well, are you defensive? No, I'm not defensive. You're defensive. Next question. This is a pretty good time to be asking this question, because if you feel yourself pushing back on either one of the first things, it's like, that's not what bitterness is. I'm not bitter. That's not what loneliness is. I'm not lonely. Well, then I guess this one would be satisfied as well. Keep pushing. I'm with you. Defensiveness is how I can always tell that I'm falling for pride. I do not like being told that I am not magnificent. I do not like seeing things that I do fail, or being told by other people that what I'm planning on doing is going to fail. I do not like to recognize my own limitations and my own humanity, and I start to defend everything I ever do. I'll cover up my mistakes. I'll try to protect my try to make it sound like I had the right motives, even if I made the wrong decisions. I'll do everything to defend my actions. I even find myself saying things like, get ready for this. You probably never heard anybody say, you probably never said this yourself. I find myself saying things like, well, that's just the way I am. Can I just say something about that phrase to myself on camera? I'm the only one in the room anyways, so. Can I just say something about the phrase, that's just the way I am? Duh. Right? Anytime I've ever heard myself saying something like, that's just the way I am, I feel like I should have interjected into my own mind, duh, Drew. We know that's just the way you are. It's just a waste of breath. Why do I even feel the need to say that's just the way I am? Whoever I'm telling that to already knows that that is just the way I am. The reason I'm having a conversation, the reason I'm feeling like I need to say that's just the way I am, is because somebody is saying, we know that's just the way you are, and it's problematic. It's hurting you, or it's hurting somebody else. Perhaps the reason I'm having a conversation where I feel like I need to say that's just the way I am, because my Heavenly Father is trying to change the way I am so that I don't destroy some stuff that really matters to me. Can I take a tiny little tangent here? It's a bit of a pet peeve of mine, and I'm guilty of it too. Pet peeves are always things that we don't like to see other people doing because we know that secretly we do them too. It's a pet peeve of mine to hear people say, I really like him, her, I really like somebody because they always just speak their mind. They always just say whatever is on the top of that. No filter. Hashtag no filter. That's what I like about him. That's what I like about her. They haven't changed in years and years and years and years. That's a pet peeve of mine to hear us glorify that trait. You know what that trait is? That is the trait of a toddler. That is the trait of a narcissist, and it is important for us to recognize that whenever we glorify that trait in other people, whenever we look at somebody else and say, I love it, people who just speak their mind no matter who it hurts, that we would say, it's probably not the kind of thing that I should glorify. When we get defensive, we are adopting those traits that we glorify in other people. We're becoming like that. The next time you find yourself about to defend who you are, the next time you find yourself about to defend how you're handling a situation or defending your very own nature, your very own character, maybe pause for a moment and just ask, am I falling for pride? Is it possible that the way I am is in friction with something in my life because God is trying to change the way I am to protect me? Is it possible that God is trying to de-glorify that trait that I think is so admirable in other people? That they just never change, that God is saying never changing is not a great idea? Is it possible that God is saying always speaking your mind and then defending what you've done and then defending the way, always feeling that pressure and wanting to be like that, God is maybe saying that the reason that's in friction, the reason you feel yourself needing to defend yourself so much right now is because I'm trying to change something in you because I love you enough to not let you screw it up like that, to not let you just stay the way you are, unchanged, undeveloped. There are changes that he wants to make if we're not falling for pride, if we're willing to humble ourselves. There are changes that he wants to make in us for our good and for the good of the people that we care about the most in life. James chapter 4, verse 6. God opposes the proud, but shows favor to the humble. This is a hugely important reality for us to remember in this. This whole conversation is for our good. Humility is God's invitation to us to a better way to be human. It's a better way to live. When we're falling for pride, our Heavenly Father wants us to know that because He cares about what is best for us, He's putting it in friction. He's giving us a filter. He's saying, hey, if you're bitter about the stuff that's going on in your life, it's because you're falling for pride. And I don't want you to fall for pride. If you're lonely right now, it might be because you're not willing to admit or not willing to ask for help when you need it. It might be that you're falling for pride, and I don't want you to fall for pride. I want better for you than that. If you're feeling defensive, like you need to say, this is the way I am a lot, or that I just speak in my mind. I'm just speaking my mind, that God might be saying, if you keep speaking your mind like that, you're going to ruin every relationship that ever mattered to you. That God might actually be saying, if you'll humble yourself before me, I will lift you up.